Well, hey everybody, welcome back to TrainWorldTV. In a previous video on this how to build a layout series, we had the entire riverbed all carved out and ready for making the river. Today's video, we finally get to make the river, including getting to the water portions and getting that nice and dry and ready for further portions of the layout build. So with that said, let's get started on how to make a river next. Okay, we have everything glued down and compressed. Now we're going to use this Dynaflex 100% waterproof interior-exterior sealant. This is a caulk to seal this area off and kind of create a pool for the Woodland Scenics water. Now, under no circumstances should you use anything that's 100% silicone. Now, your humble host here never makes any mistakes. Never makes any mistakes. But 100% silicone will not allow anything to adhere to it. Paint will bead up, and even drywall compound, which sometimes we use for the riverbed base, cracks and does not adhere. And this caulk that I just showed you would not adhere if you were to try to seal the edges with 100% silicone product. So my suggestion, find something that's not silicone or just has silicone added. And added benefit is this is clay, which some of the riverbeds around the area I'll be modeling have clay. You know, some of the ground is clay based or heavy clay. So we're going to go ahead and move on now. Now I may or may not have mentioned earlier that the area I'm putting this into is not perfectly level. So I've made this removable so I could just slide it out. And we can actually get the water to set and dry here after we put down this caulk. So the caulk, you're just going to run a bead, pretty thick bead, because we're going to smear it out here along the edge. Anywhere that we're going to want that Woodland Scenics water to pool up is going to need a pretty serious bead. But fret not, because we'll be adding some more insurance on the ends here. I'm going to try something kind of experimental that I've never seen in any video, but I believe will work based on the history, my history with the product. So right now we're working on caulk, and sometimes this little chunks of foam will break free. You'll want to clear those out. You don't want to mess up your riverbed. And I can simply spin this around to get the rest of the area here. We see the caulk has run over. That's okay. We can clean this up a little bit. This is also paintable, so when you're looking for a product, make sure it says that it can be painted. This says it can be painted in 2 hours. I've noticed with some tests that that is not necessarily true. Got this little spackling tool here where I can kind of fill in the gaps. So we want to bead this up and make sure nothing's going to escape water-wise. I'm going to go run this up here. You can also use a paintbrush. Remember, this is all going to get painted, so being careful with worrying about colors and such are not a big deal. One thing I am going to do is go ahead and attempt to use the caulk on this bottom of the foam, because foam may or may not, depending on its consistency, waterproof the area. So there's a very high possibility, I've seen it happen before, where depending on which type of water products you use, you can actually have the water product permeate the foam. So I'd prefer to cover this entire area with caulk. And people may think I'm crazy here, but I'm telling you, once you get a leak with that water effect, those water effects, or magic water, or Woodland Scenics water, it becomes a nightmare because it's a gel essentially, and it's going everywhere. So I'm taking as many precautions as I can to ensure we don't have a leak. Now the great thing about having this kind of in diorama form is I can see all the areas I missed and where that water may try to seep out, and I can get them addressed. So we have our riverbed laid down here, and I continue to apply caulk where I can, but I'm about wrapped up here. And you may say to yourself, James, this looks like a hot mess, and it absolutely does. But keep in mind, once this dries really hard, it's paintable. You know, you can vary the thicknesses of the paint. And a lot of these patterns you can adjust. So if there's an unnatural looking pattern, like this straight line over here, you can just kind of cross it up and make it look more natural. You know, there's not a whole lot of razor sharp straight lines that appear in nature, but you know, it's going to be under 1/8 of an inch of water, so it's going to be painted, so it'll look much better than it does as it sits. Alright, we're going to let this dry, but a couple of pointers. Make sure you take that caulk all the way up past any river that you'll put it, the river level at, so you want it well above, or you'll make yourself prone to leaks. And don't be afraid to use generous amounts of it, because it will dry, and it can be painted if it's brought up to the shores like you see here, or it can stay a natural color if you use clay. If you don't like the color, you can paint it. So it's paintable. You want it thick and applied well, so that you're giving yourself the best chance to prevent leaks. Okay, the caulk is all dry, and now we turn to paint. And as you can see here, we are looking at Riverstone low sheen paint here. Basically what you're going to want to do is make sure it's low sheen. Go to your local home improvement store and ask for anything that's an earth color paint, and they can mix something up for you or point something out to you. We're just going to apply this with a paintbrush in the same area that all the caulk was, and that'll add another layer of sealed area for the water to pool in and make sure we don't have any leaks. Alright, you want to make sure the paint is mixed well. This is latex paint. The brand, in case you want to know, is Montage Riverstone Low Sheen, and I picked it up on Amazon instead of going to my local improvement store, home improvement store. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and get this applied here. I won't make you watch me do this whole thing, so we'll fast forward to the end. Alright, our riverbed is dry, it's painted, and you may be asking, why didn't I paint this area yet? Because we are going to actually be applying all sorts of products that can get into the water, and I want the water dry before we do that. So I'm going to go ahead and pour water first, and then we'll paint up these edges and do the scenery after. So the first step on making sure you're ready for a pour is the following. I take a ruler, with a level in it, or just a level, and we're going to make sure that we are level, you know, across all ways here, and anything that isn't, we can make an adjustment on that. So Like that's just slightly off, you know. Some people consider it level, but I want it perfectly level because you don't want that fluid shifting anyway. So I'll be moving ever so slightly to adjust this. And I've got this on a board, as you can see here, to protect the layout. And then I can also, you know, shim the board as necessary to make things level. And then once it's all dry, we can just insert it over to this area over here. So it makes it a lot easier when you're working with an area you can make sure is level and have some mobility with. After we've determined everything is level, you can double check that because you're going to be applying some tape or something to seal this off with. I'm using a little experiment. It's a little pricey experiment, but it's flex tape, like the brand of Flex products from the you know, as seen on TV. But this flex tape has a side that just peels off and it's adhesive, and we're gonna apply this. So as you can see, we're peeling this protective plastic off and applying it to the edge, and we're pressing to seal off all areas so that this water can pool. We're not going that deep, but it's better safe than sorry to make sure it doesn't escape, because much like real water, it's a little thicker, but it will find a way out. And that's why, another reason why I have this board underneath, to protect the layout from any leaks. We had some really bad leaks on my last pour, on my last layout, so I'm trying to make sure we mitigate that as much as possible this time. Alright, what we have over here is Woodland Scenic's Deep Pour Water Clear. This is the first time this kit's being opened up, so what you see is what you're going to get. You have the water base, the activator, instruction booklet. There are also 2 different cups in here. Stir, which we're going to try to keep clean. Don't want anything messing up our water. A Ziploc bag. And some plastic gloves to protect your hands. That's nice of them to include. Alright, you open the first page and you have this sitting in here. These are sticky labels for the cups, and it shows in the directions that you're placing it right at the edge of the lip of the cup. You're going straight down. We'll do the same with the other cup. Right at the lip. Probably a little hard to see with it being clear. We're just going straight down. Okay, next steps is to put the deep pour clear and the activator in a plastic bag. Leave a little air, little opening so you can get all the air out as possible. Then you're going to drop it in over here. I stole my wife's mixing bowl. 120 degree water temperature is what they say. Now 120 degrees is what most water heaters are set at, so I think you're fine with just getting your water good and hot and putting it in a bowl or jug and then putting these in. Okay, we're back, and it has been 15 minutes, which is how long this has to sit. And I'm going to go ahead and remove it. They said the water base and activator should be warm to the touch, but not hot. Now what we're doing is going back and forth slowly, not shaking, just moving this about for about 5 seconds a piece. Alright, I know it's a bit hard to see, but you can see the measurements here on this clear cup. There's a website on Woodland, or I'm sorry, there's a calculator on Woodland Scenic's website to see how much you need, I'm just going to go to about the 180 point here. You can see we're at 180. You want to wait for that to settle. They call it a dome. It kind of settles down eventually. Now we're going to pour this. It's going to be 90 to 180, which equals 270. So we're not going to stop until we get to 270. And there is a lag, so you want to make sure that you kind of stop pouring before you get to that point, just to be sure. And I forgot to mention earlier, it's best to wear these gloves, so when you're pouring, that's when you want to put these on. So now, as you can see, we have 180 to 270, 180 to 90 mix, which adds up to 270. You can even see kind of a line where the water base is sitting below and the activator sitting above. We're going to stir. Now, you don't want to go crazy and stir this like you're mixing batter for pancakes or anything. That has the propensity to create water bubbles. What we want to do is just gently stir for 5 minutes. Alright, we've been mixing for about 5 minutes. You want to scrape the sides. Just make sure getting a little more uniform in appearance here. As you can see, a couple bubbles have kind of worked their way in, so we try to make sure those aren't present. And that's about 5 minutes. So now, this is where we get a little off the Woodland Scenics suggestions here. And I'll drop that out. Now, the goal of my water is to meet my backdrop, so I'm going to drop some oil-based paint in here. And resume stirring. As we can see, we now have a more blue field of water there. I prefer to use Woodland Scenics tents, but due to logistics I did not have time. They mix a little better, but that's pretty well mixed. Now it's time for the pour itself. I've already verified everything is closed off. So we're going to pour accordingly. Okay, we're pouring the rest here. This will spread out and spread in. Don't want to go too deep because you're risking more of a leak in this area. So you just want to be real careful with that. Now it looks like we have no bubbles. That's kind of the depth I go to on this. It could turn out better if I went deeper, but I'm going to go ahead and let this dry, and I don't know about letting it dry and then going to additional levels. So for the purpose of this diorama, we'll just continue with this level depth. Now I know it looks like there's bubbles on that end, but that's actually just a reflection of the flex tape. It is completely flat, so I'm happy with how that's turned out on this area. Not as happy with the depth, but I have to get used to not having a hobby shop right down the road, and I probably should have doubled up on the Woodland Scenics. They do not really provide you enough for the size of river I have to go really deep. Okay, as you can see, the river here is dry. I actually shaved this down some more to make sure the bridges were ready to be level with the cork road bed, and that the track wouldn't have any variations or dips or bows in it. And this was all covered with foam shavings, and I was able to still clear it off because it's completely dry. So I still need to do more layers, I think, in my opinion, but for the purpose of this video, we're going to go ahead and continue on. So here's our finished product. Just kidding. This is our backdrop, and what I'm trying to do is match the color up. So we had kind of a brown base, and then I was going to do a blue layer of water. Now this did end up a little thinner than I like, even though this is a pretty shallow stream. But the good news is the area where the backdrop merges with your scenery is not really visible. The bridges block it out. It doesn't have to be perfectly matched up because it's a lot deeper on the terrain than was my previous layout. I would like to get some depth to this. I'm researching now to see if maybe I can add additional layers, but for now we're going to let it dry. Our goal is to make this happen to where it merges in nicely. Now, one thing I will mention is that I am not going to put any ripples or anything in the water, and people kind of fight me on that, and I'm going to explain my thought process behind this. If you want to put ripples in the water, you just take a straw, and when it first starts drying, you start moving the water around into ridges and ripples. You can even use Woodland Scenics water effects to add water effects around objects that you put on the base of your river, which I didn't put anything because you don't see much on here until you get back to this area. Overall though, I want the viewer to at least take a couple of seconds and think, is this real or is this a model? And if you have frozen waves and frozen ripples, that first few seconds is a dead giveaway. They're still going to figure it out mostly because the water's not moving much, depending on the scene angles and such. But it's a dead giveaway. It's the same way I feel about HO scale figures. There's certain scenes I want them in, but certain scenes I don't because I want it to be realistic. So it's your call, but I've given you the tools on how to make your river and how to make those ripples if you want. Well, I hope you found that video informative. The main thing about how to make a river is making sure it's level and sealed. That water, no matter what brand or version you use, is going to want to seep out of any area it can find, so make sure you seal that up really well. This build turned out pretty decently. I hope you enjoyed it. With this section of how to build a layout, there's a lot more to continue down the road, so I hope you'll stick with us here on TrainWorldTV. And again, you can pick up a lot of those products, including the realistic water from Woodland Scenics, on TrainWorld.com. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time right here on TrainWorldTV. Take care.